I never had much reason to doubt my son's abilities. From the time Pecos was born, everyone could tell he was different. He had a full head of extremely thick hair, chops that could have been stylized, and his eyes seemed to already be able to focus on objects in his surroundings not long after. At 3 months old, he spoke his first word, eat, and would not stop saying it until I pulled over during that brief road trip from Austin to Corpus Christi to find him something substantial. It turned out to be a banana from a convenience store. He rarely cried as a toddler, and spent most of his time around me just staring at me and my map collection, as if he was trying to figure us out. He shared the same quizzical look with his mother that she gave me from time to time, except admittedly, his moments of realization during our conversations seemed to come more frequently than hers, and his were never laced with profanity at that. Soon he was walking, and by the age of 2, he could recite most of the alphabet and count to 10. When he started pre-K, it was revealed that he was severely dyslexic, and although he had the ability to recognize small words at a glance, his ability to pronounce multi-syllable words suffered greatly. For years, we were in agony with the odds of him ever becoming fully literate stacking against us with each birthday party. The bullies, the world's weight of cruelty for the different and unusual among us, weighing down every day as it became crushingly apparent that doctor after doctor was right about my son never being able to learn to read. One summer after his mother left us, I came up with an exercise for him that I thought would help his ability to read. It was a simple idea. I would write a word, and then would draw a picture next to it to cement the meaning of that word as a symbol into his head. He enjoyed the activity immensely, and we began to fill notepads with words and pictures until he was able to spell multiple words just by looking at pictures. Eventually, letters would spill out of his mouth all day long as we took trips to the West Texas oil fields, where I made my money. He read street signs and navigated us through the countryside to oil rigs 20 miles from the nearest human being, so I could grab logs and have him load them into the software on my AIX laptop. By the end of the summer, I had contacted his school district, informing them of the breakthrough, and we employed the help of teachers, tutors, and specialists in order to bring him up to speed. And once he had completely rewired his brain to be able to read through his disability, something inside him caught fire. He shone like a beacon of intellect in grade school, consuming book after book, and even had this curious habit of tearing out the last page of each and folding it into some beautiful works of origami. And eventually, he had practically created his own microcosm of things to play with that enabled him to build out his perception of the world around him. We thought such behavior clever, endearing, and innocent enough, and he continued to learn and create all the way through the day. Pecos graduated from university at the age of 16 with a master's in electrical engineering and a bachelor's in geochemistry. He was destined for greatness, a star in his own right, and soon the world would see how one little boy could overcome the illiteracy his mother's side of the family had suffered since the time they began to walk upright only a few hundred years ago. By the time he was 20, he had righteously abandoned higher education and was already working at a government-funded laboratory at a Canadian ore mine, where his team was tasked with developing terraforming technologies. The Geological Integration and Naturalizing Terraforming Project was his core focus, and his brainchild was what everyone in the world would simply come to know as the Giant. What he came up with by the end of his 10-year, self-imposed tenure at this ore mine, which was smack in the middle of a giant, old-growth forest, and nestled at a triple junction fault that merged several ancient and relatively new geological formations, was a behemoth of a machine that was as tall as a 6-story building and as wide and long as a football field. The place was a playground for geologists, one that I could have ever only hoped to spend even a weekend in the field at. The first giant was a nuclear-powered juggernaut capable of strip mining the fault zone for all it was worth, separating the mineral ores, smelting metals, and even harvesting trees. It rode along 10 independently suspended, triangular-shaped treads that enabled it to literally climb mountains while consuming them, all while layering terrain, creating fences and roads, and planting trees in its tracks. This thing literally shat gold bricks among many other raw materials like perfect lumber, and it was even purifying the water it picked up. As time went on and technology progressed, funding gave birth to a new generation of giants that were able to create more and more complex machinery, with the third iteration being as big as the biggest football stadium. An immense carbon fiber spider as tall as a 50-story building capable of drilling oil and gas wells, like some enormous mosquito sucking blood out of the earth. Its huge, stilt-like legs and dozens of treaded feet as big as steel cargo containers carried the monster across the countryside, scooping up bigger and bigger swaths of the landscape and leaving behind buildings, waterways, resources repositories, and beautiful scenery that included everything from Roman concrete castles and nanoparticle engineered to supporting superconductive electrical grid sectors, and vast amounts of communications bandwidth in its fiber optic wake. Just the infrastructure beneath all of these things, the tunnels, corridors, and structural engineering to bear the weight of our new civilization, sometimes stretched a quarter of a mile into the ground. It was throughout these catacombs of technological wonder that we human beings found peace with our planet, finally giving back what so many generations of greedy and obsolete men took without reciprocation. My little boy grew up to become a giant himself when he ultimately played a key role in the international effort to develop the AI necessary for the giants to work together autonomously to build the 5th generation of machines. And what happened next is somewhat predictable enough, but the aftermath never fails to inspire awe at our achievement as sentient beings. Even though our loss of control over the penultimate creation of the human race itself created abject horror, and a short-lived global humanitarian crisis based on wild, worst-case scenario speculation by governments, the wealthy and the poor alike, it soon became apparent that we had nothing to worry about as the face of the Earth was slowly being transformed into a technological utopia. All of the scars we created with our toxic waste and desertification being replaced with breathtaking architecture, final generation crops, 100% solar energy efficient materials, and panoramic views of everything from cataract waterfalls stretching for miles into the horizon to giant sequoia forests with built-in living spaces for humans to feast our senses on for as far as the eye could see. One day I got a call from a somber, familiar voice I knew from a visit to the ore mine I made while my son was working there. It was a woman with whom he had fallen madly in love, and she slowly explained to me that the father of her children, the father of my grandchildren, the father of the immortal giant, had gone missing in the night, seemingly carried away with a blizzard while the grieving moans of the storm against their creaking cabin walls barely hid the taillights of the 4x4 authorities eventually found parked next to the project's main research facility tucked away on the outskirts of the Sudbury Impact Basin. Pecos was never seen again, but we all knew where he went. This 5th generation and largest giant to ever crawl across the face of the planet was so big It was easily visible from the ISS, with its towering legs supporting a platform-like structure that cast a shadow as spacious as our largest metropolis, capable of walking across the ocean floor while remaining miles in the air, and even harvesting raw magma from the Earth, until it had enough liquid metal to create its own magnetic field to use for a propulsion system we may never even need to fully understand. What we do know is that this last of the terrestrial giants was not only able to orbit the planet, but it was also capable of interplanetary travel within our solar system within a matter of months after its initial launch. The machine only took what it needed to achieve orbit and begin to rebuild itself in a way that we could again never have predicted. Many worried that, as it grew, its magnetic field could disrupt the Earth's interior, but it left without so much as an earthquake, as if to kiss the human race goodbye with the good grace that only a mother could understand from such a bewilderingly complex and unforeseen manifestation the human imagination could conjure. This is when things started to become truly mind-blowing. Before it left Earth's orbit, the giant left us a nicely terraformed ring around the planet, halfway to the moon, and a host of space elevators anchoring the ring deep into cratons around the globe. I am actually looking up at the Earth right now, at the North American continent, while enjoying a nice cup of old-fashioned coffee in a ski lodge, perched on top of one of the ring's highest mountain peaks. And all I can say is that I am glad the giants helped us figure out how to live to be 200 years old and still find life enjoyable. If there ever was a God, he has finally found a home for all of us to see, hear, touch, taste, and smell in a giant. We believe the spacefaring giant was able to mine the asteroid belt for enough raw materials to become as big as our moon. And the shape, the dimensions of this thing were just beautiful. Words difficultly describe what an omnipotent form of AI, combined with the raw ability to transform the universe around it, as it saw fit to propagate itself, even looks like. The angles, the curves, the sheer size and shapes. It was almost like one of those 3D fractals I used to see on YouTube when I was a child. Observations showed us that the machine would stockpile materials in vertical bars, with tree-like structures of raw metals growing out of it, with the giant constantly changing shape as it evolved, optimizing its internal structure in ways we can only theorize about. The spires shrank and grew, fluctuating in color and radiating within slots of the electromagnetic spectrum that gave us clues to the myriad of new alloys it was using to recreate itself from the inside out. A tree of material would fluctuate in size as the giant saw fit to consume a portion of it and grow in one direction or another, much like the old sci-fi movies would portray the creation of human flesh as a product of fine robotics that sourced tubes of material to layer together parts of the human body, like the 3D printer I got for my own 10th birthday. We observed the giant orbit within the asteroid belt for about 10 years before it headed for Jupiter and started swallowing moons, growing in unpredictable ways each time it finished one, and we humorously ascribed this to a nutrient deficiency of some sort. While it seemed to regurgitate some moons, always of differing composition and always an absolute marvel to lay eyes upon, it left Enceladus entirely alone in its original glory. We could easily surmise what this meant, and our base orbiting that moon is being populated with some of our brightest minds as I write. As a coup de grace, before leaving Jupiter, the giant hurled Titan into low orbit around the gas giant, and as the host planet's gravity vacuumed the moon's surface into its own atmosphere, a beautiful, aurora-laced stream of rainbow light wrapped the planet from pole to pole like a candy cane. It left us with a spiral-cut brown dwarf ignited by the hydrocarbon-rich moon's final fall into the atmosphere, with a little help from the simultaneous ejection of one of the largest spires on the giant. We have yet to find an exoplanet like it, even after having discovered millions of them. One of the other peculiarities was the stream of breadcrumbs the giant left for us as it traversed the solar system. We came to find out that these breadcrumbs were waypoints left behind as a gift for our own purposes, custom designed for our species to thrive and explore the solar system all the way to the heliopause and back. Breadcrumbs are interplanetary resorts launched away from the sun on a trajectory towards distant stars, capable of supporting human life far into interstellar space, which is where the eye wanders today at night. The last theory goes that the giant became so big that it found the necessary energy available in the molten core of the planet Venus, which we can only surmise was more suitable than it found readily available anywhere else that it needed in order to achieve truly interstellar travel. As it beamed away from the solar system, it left a beautifully luminescent streak across the night sky, presumably populated with breadcrumbs that we have yet to develop the technology to reach, shimmering and sparkling, like old pictures of distant, star-forming regions of the galaxy from the Hubble telescope. I remember as a child. Like many of my generation, we remember what it was like to want to live near the pillars of creation, how unfair it felt to look at our mostly black sky, only dotted with stars we could not see up close. And how things have turned out. As I gaze across the cosmos between the ring and the earth, my view is filled with the sight of what must be enormous machinery, technology as advanced as is physically possible, objects large enough to be measured in parsecs, and leaving behind wondrous streaks of multicolored structure and wake as they seem to consume and recreate entire star systems. Every now and then, a huge flash from some point in the galaxy will light up the sky, leaving behind a beautiful aura, with an instantaneous red-shifted flash being detected from some impossibly distant part of the universe. Sometimes, I have these dreams where I'm back at my childhood home in the West Texas countryside watching a meteor shower with my dad on the porch, miles from anywhere, and the most memorable sight being a jagged trail of glowing hot debris from a spiraling meteorite that wound up landing not far from our home. In the dream, the meteor's tail begins to etch lightning-like holes in the sky, geometrically encompassing the night with a suffocating structure, stark and claw-like around the planet. I wake up feeling sore and fatigued as if my heart had spent the last hour beating at full speed, even though the dream itself only took seconds. I can never tell if I feel horrified because of the traumatic expanse of my memories of what was and what is now. The world as we knew it has been changed forever, and only those who saw it as before have the physiological scars in our white matter that can account for the turning point in the history of the human race. It is a cross to bear as much as the disappearance of my son. The most beautiful thing about the giant is that it left us a way to tell which stars have life around them, which ones have habitable planets, and perhaps ultimately which ones are worth keeping intact for whatever self-preserving logic we imparted in it before it left our planet, because they are the lights in the sky that are still where they were when our ancestors first mapped it. What's left is an ever-growing masterpiece of particle physics that took our love for fireworks to the ultimate level, and one three-dimensional constellation of a paper crane, perfectly drafted from stardust. That stands out to me personally as a final farewell from my baby boy, who is traveling the universe at speeds faster than light, doing something people told him he would never be able to do. The only thing the giant did not do for our race is take us to the stars on its back, a very humbling lesson in humility, and one which we have our barbaric ancestry to thank for. Perhaps our newer generations, the post-giant era of humanity, will be born without the constant need to best one another and be born into an existence where technology has enabled our species to finally prosper and want for nothing other than to surf in the wake of the giant.